Hello, today I'm joined by James Veevers. Nice to meet you, James.
Nice to meet you too, Chris.
So the idea is that we're going to talk about resting, long rest, short rest, I guess in a sense, healing a little bit. So do you want to start us off? Do you have any firm thoughts?
Oh, do I ever?
Good.
I've I started playing D&D in the mid 90s with what is now commonly referred to as second edition, and played through the various editions and other TTRPGs as well. And I feel that resting, short rests and long rests, is probably the most broken mechanic in fifth edition, and really is perhaps the toughest obstacle for DMs to overcome in creating balanced encounters.
Okay. Well, maybe we should go over what resting is. So resting, sleep, eat, tend their wounds, refresh their minds for spell casting. We've got short rest is at least 1 hour, including you can eat, you can drink, you can read, and then you get a hit dice. Spend your hit dice per level plus your con mod.
Yep.
So you can control to a degree how much you rest. And then a character regains some hit dice upon finishing a long rest. I don't do that. We have always done full rest, full heal, because I've generally been running new players, including myself, and we struggle enough without having limited hit dice, although I'm sure that's a much more interesting way of doing it. So there's short rest. Have you got any problems with a short rest?
For me, yeah. I mean, it's difficult. I mean, I know the DMG and it suggests that you aim for between 3 to 5 encounters per day, and D&D at its core is about resource management, and the best sessions for me as a player and as a DM is when you really test those players. You really start draining their spell slots, their magic item resources, their charges, and then they have to start thinking outside the box. A lot of people have come to 5th edition and play it almost like a computer game, and the short rest mechanic doesn't help with that. It reinforces it. So you say with your games you don't short rest with your players at all. It's long rest or nothing.
Oh no, what I was saying was the long rest differs in that we don't do half hit dice regained.
Oh, you don't.
So short rests are the same, but of course, there's the players want to short rest almost like quick save.
Absolutely.
Like go around the corner and quick save.
Absolutely. And yep, you can interrupt their rest with an encounter, but straight after they're just going to go rest again.
Yeah.
But I think with a few little tweaks, it can be fixed. I've scoured it. I've seen obviously variant rules in the DMG as well. There's lots of things people have homebrewed. But the thing I like the most is, and I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's the sanctuary system. And if you want a long rest, you need to have access to food, water, warmth, and most importantly, safety. If you haven't got all them, you can't long rest. So long resting out in the wilds becomes not impossible, but very, very difficult. And then suddenly it's about resource management. And I'm not talking about spell slot regaining either. That's different. That has to stay. I'm just talking about magic nap time, where you've dealt critical damage to a player and then they just get their head down for 8 hours and suddenly the wounds are all healed. It breaks the immersion. It makes and almost really with the mid to high level tier games, why even run random encounters when traveling? They're only going to get 1 a day anyway, maybe 2 if you're lucky, and you just can't drain them down enough unless you're just throwing ridiculously overpowered encounters at them. So yeah, it's something I feel pretty strongly about. I've been running a campaign now with some who were new players 2.5 years ago, and we're fast approaching the end of the campaign. And I've already warned them, campaign 2 is going to be different when it comes to resting. And the sanctuary system is definitely going to be one I'm going to be introducing. But the second one is only being able to regain hit dice if you're either going to expend a spell slot or going to expend a healing kit, which is going to require proficiency.
Okay. So you've got to buy healing kits and be proficient in healing.
Absolutely.
So there's no natural healing then.
Exactly. Well, again, now this is the next option I'm looking at, natural healing. There should be some natural healing, and whether that's just proficiency bonus plus con, or maybe just your con modifier, to a minimum of 1 per day, then absolutely. In the older editions, we had natural healing, but it was very low, and you would have to rest for weeks. I mean weeks, and that then lends over to something which I don't think is much used in 5th edition enough, and that is downtime. If you've got a party member who's been nearly eviscerated by a lich in a dungeon, and you're having to cart them back to the nearest city and they're recuperating for a couple of weeks, why shouldn't the rest of the party have a bit of downtime? Downtime is there to add to the story, and I'm all about adding to the story.
But the problem is in the dungeon crawl, isn't it? When they're going room to bang, bang, and then they find this little room and they wedge themselves in and they say, "This is the long rest room, guys." You can't have them sat there for weeks, can you? It doesn't make sense.
Exactly, where the sanctuary system comes in. I mean, at the moment, I have a blanket, no long rest in a dungeon.
Okay.
No, the monsters will unite. They'll
Find
call for
you.
reinforcements, and they'll come and smash your door down.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's no long rest in my dungeon, but short rests. Even short rests are enough as well to really skew those encounters.
Let me bring in the long rest explanation here then. Extended downtime, at least 8 hours long, can be more. A character must sleep for at least 6. I always used to think it was 8 hours, but you don't. You have to sleep for 6, unless you're an elf and you've got the 4. So for 2 hours, you cannot do like walking, fighting, casting spells, or similar, whatever the DM decides on that. The characters regain all the lost hit points up to full, like they never had any stabs or anything. They just miraculously come back. Yeah, that is an issue. They also regain spent hit dice, or rather up to half the character's total. So a level 10 character can only get 5 back, which is some way of making it realistic. That's their effort, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
They can't benefit from more than 1 long rest in a 24-hour period, which I've also had. Going around a large city, they rest, or they wake up from a rest at the start of the session. Within an hour and a half's play, let's long rest here. I'm like, it's literally 11 a.m. How are you going to long, So, yeah, that is an issue. But this is the last bit I want to get to. You can't gain any benefit from a long rest if you don't have 1 health point. So if someone's gone down and they say, well, we'll just pull them into this safe zone and can we just let them get better? No, they don't regain. You need to heal. You need to do something.
That's right.
It's something I didn't know.
It's a small nod towards the realism of it, isn't it? But it is a small nod. And, I think Wizards of the Coast acknowledge that because there is the variant rules in the DMG, and you only have to start browsing the Reddit threads and home brewery to find that other people are also a bit disillusioned with it. I root for my players. I really do. It's collaborative storytelling, and I want the good guys to win. We all want the good guys to win, but I don't want to make it easy for them. And describing a particularly savage critical hit, which downs somebody, and then they just go for a magic nap time, and then suddenly okay the next day. Yeah, it is problematic. It's problematic. So I'd like to see something, in future editions to go back to that. I think the players will benefit from it as well.
Yeah, because you can go fight in a room, then rest, short rest, and then fight and short rest. There's no limit, is there, as far as I can tell?
There's really not.
I guess your hit dice that you spend, but
the higher level they go, the more hit dice they've got, the more spell slots you got, and it's easy to challenge players the low to mid tier. And when I say low to mid tier, I'm saying level 1 to sort of level 8. From 8 onwards, it becomes more challenging, and you want people to feel panicky. You want people to feel like this could be it.
Yeah.
And we don't want to see the same thing. We don't want to see wizards dropping fireballs all the time, and the fight is just hacking and slashing, and the repetitiveness of it. We want to see players coming up with an inventive encounters. Use the environment, talk, use diplomacy, fake it, anything, rather than just let's just deal more damage to them than they can do to us, and then we'll go have a nap, and then regain those hit dice, and then carry on to the next one. How boring for the DM? How boring for the players?
Yeah. But players can also, monsters can also do the same. They could retreat, and you sort of think, oh, we've won, we've beaten them. And then during that long rest, it's a surprise attack, you were asleep. Yeah. Because, I don't know about you, but how often do the viewers in a long rest say, well, who's not getting a long rest? Who's staying awake? Because they have to keep watch.
Absolutely.
And normally I will put you see something moving in the shadows, do you wake everyone else and jeopardize their long rest, or do you have to deal with this yourself? And certain players, I know they want help. They're like, I might die. And so they wake everybody up, and I'm like, that's just a rabbit. It's all right. Everyone's awake, And it's just, it's playing with that. Well, you've ruined your rest now, haven't you? Everyone's awake. You're not popular. But, So to talk about the DMG, as you said, epic heroism, which I have open here. So short rests being only 5 minutes long and a long rest of 1 hour. This is kind of more against what you're saying. A long rest of 1 hour. So spellcasters using this system can afford to burn through spells quickly, especially at higher levels. This is super computer gamey, isn't it?
Absolutely.
But maybe some people want that, but it does say you must make the combat harder. I guess if you've got a completely combat heavy group of people, then it will suit. But on the other hand, you've got the gritty realism variant, where a short rest is 8 hours. Is this going back to old school, you were saying?
It is a little bit, yeah.
And a long rest is a week. So therefore, you've got to watch how many battles you have in a day, and it brings it into downtime, like you were saying. Between adventures, you can craft armor, perform research, or spend gold. There is things to do in that time.
Absolutely.
So it could work into a longer story. But as I say, a dungeon, it doesn't work, does it? With established. No. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how I feel about any of them, really. I want different things as a DM than my players want. I quite like the idea of players starting from level 0 and saying for the first session, you don't know what you want to be. You're studying at school to be a wizard, perhaps, but you've not yet chosen your path. And they're like, no. I don't want to play a week or 2 weeks being level 0. And then when my son, who was up against it, went to be DM, he was like, actually, now I see why you like that, because you want them to slowly build out their characters. But as a player, you just I want to hit things.
Yeah, I think there are definitely different expectations from different players and different groups. And it's definitely about pitching it. I think newer players aren't interested in the gritty realism side of it. Tracking ammunition, encumbrance, rations. I mean, honestly, how many DMs track rations? How many DMs are, your water skins are getting low? You're going to have to find, that's a different sort of game. And there are probably groups who enjoy that. And I think I'd probably quite enjoy a few games like that. I'm not sure I want an entire campaign like that out in the wilds, struggling to survive and going from town to town, scratching around for money and dredging up clues. But I'd probably like a portion of a campaign to be like that. It's all about generating those plot points.
Yeah, I used that method in the Jungles of Chult. It was like you need to get water, you need to get food, and also in Out of the Abyss they were very strong on you're walking for days, you need to forage, and you can find this sort of food which gives you these effects. But as much as I started off for the first few weeks really into it, after a couple of months I was like, you know what, you've got enough things on you now, I can't be bothered, there's more things going on than that. But it is fun in a little while. Yeah,
and the higher up level they go, they create food, water, there's good berry, but there's all of that. But Out of the Abyss has some great lore regarding the Underdark, and I've run that campaign myself, and it is a lot of fun. And we only done that really until about level 3 or 4, and then we laid that down on the wayside.
I hear that a lot, that people start it and don't finish it.
Oh no, we finished the campaign in an epic way, but just with the the tracking of the ammunition, and it's great at low level. It's that real sense of urgency and danger. You're lost in the Underdark. Obviously, the problem with that was that half of the players, well, everybody knew the campaign were going to be running, so half of players made Underdark orientated characters who were able to speak all the languages, etc. But that's the way of it now, isn't it?
Well, after Out of the Abyss, we had the conversation. You are not going to find out what you're playing next. You make a character and you suck it up.
Oh, really? See?
Yeah.
But it's there, isn't it? That need to challenge, to make it fun for everybody. Testing the players and testing the DM and their skills. Let's make it a bit harder for them.
Yeah, I agree. Now, another thing to do with resting is the sleeping in armor. And, it takes like 10 minutes to take off armor, I believe, or put it on, and it's quicker to take it off. But anyway, sleeping in armor requires, according to my notes here, a con save, or you get 1 level of exhaustion, which I really like. You get all these armored up people sit down by a campfire, and then as soon as trouble breaks out, they're up and they're fighting. It's like, you've not got your armor on, mate.
Absolutely,
Your AC is 10.
Although, according to historical documents, it wasn't uncommon for people to sleep in armor. Apparently, it can be quite comfortable. But
really?
But again, it's that little bit of realism, a little bit more challenging them. I recently ran an encounter with my Friday night campaign where they were traveling by air, and I challenged them and said, "Look, you guys are carrying a lot of stuff. If you're going to be traveling by air, you're able to go direct routes. You're saving a bit of travel time because you're not having to circumvent round hills and so on and so forth. I want you guys to total up your encumbrance because I feel you're over." So we crunched all the numbers, and we basically got down to the fact that they were all allowed 1 item, 1 weapon, and no armor between all of them. And when I threw a random encounter at them, and they did get a random encounter because they were traveling for a few days, by gosh, did they all have squeaky bum time over that one? And that was enjoyable, and they enjoyed it as well. But some of them I legitimately thought that was gonna end us. And they all walked away talking about it. And that's as a DM, that's what we're after. We're after the players talking about the session. So, what a great session! I thought I was going to die. So and so done this. That's what we're after. And sometimes you need that element of danger in order to get it.
So that's true. The next issue with resting. So, if you've got a big cleric and there are people who can do, is it a bard that can, like, I don't know. There's people who can heal and be healed by them healing others.
The life domain, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So, is that good? Is that bad? Yeah.
I think it's good. I think, I don't know about you, but I find a lot of players steer away from cleric. In the older editions, you had to have one of each. You had to have a rogue, you had to have a cleric, you had to have a wizard, you had to have some martial class, be it barbarian or fighter. And if you didn't have those 4 core classes, you weren't successful as an adventuring party. With the resting mechanic in 5th edition as it is, you don't necessarily have to have that cleric druid now. But when people who do, and they take the life domain, they shine. I mean, they really shine. But it makes that they can really save an encounter. Do they find it boring? Yeah, probably. Nobody wants to be the healer, do they? No one just wants to spend every turn healing.
I have a mother of a child who comes and plays because she brings him, and she is constantly the life domain cleric. That was the first character she played, and so now she's always it. And is quite happy, but she's not fully invested in the game. But it's such a solid class. It's so good. It's got a bit of magic. It's got a bit of fighting. But yes, the rest of my players are not racing to be the healer or a cleric.
No, I mean, I've had groups which have had a war domain cleric, and they've wanted to be in the thick of it. They're all domain cleric, they worship Tempest or Cord or whoever. They want to be in the thick of it, but then that nullifies them as a healer. But it's a tricky one. I've not met many players who take to it, but the life domain is definitely one of the strongest domains for clerics.
Yeah. So how are we going to fix it then? How are we going to fix resting?
Do you know what? I'm gonna try this sanctuary. system in campaign 2 with my Friday night group. You know, you have to have warmth, water, food, and most importantly, you've got to have safety. And so that's going to pretty much nullify it in the wilds. Certainly nullify it in the in dungeons. I think I'm going to introduce these healing kits and proficiency in it. You know, people have got to bind wounds in order to get those hit dice back. You know, a bit of first aid, and then what I need to look at then is a fair and balanced natural healing process. If you rest up for a day, you're going to regain some hit points regardless through natural healing, and we'll see where that takes us. It may be like tracking ammunition and you know, the rest of the resources. By the time I get to 5th, 6th level, I might decide it's too cumbersome and ditch it. But I hope not. I hope not, because we want the players to be challenged. I want to challenge the players. I want to make them feel like they've earned it, and I don't want to have to just be throwing ancient dragons at them in order to give them difficult encounters. I'm not that lazy of a DM, but you know, you get the feeling of it. So yeah, that's where I'm going to be taking it. The campaign 2, bit more realism.
Yeah,
and see where they go with it.
There's another way to hurt the players, as it were, to give them those conditions where your maximum hit point is reduced. You know, if you can get monsters that life drain your health total. I can't remember. There's a few monsters that immediately hit your strength score. And if your strength score goes to 0, you're dead. You might be the best, you know, 150 hit pointer, but your strength score is like 18. It's like, mate, you've got 18 times to do this, and then you're dead. And I really like that.
Yeah, you know, again, this is something really prevalent in older editions. There are monsters which drained years off you, drained ability scores off you. You know, I think the Ghost in 5th edition might drain a few years off you, D4 or something. But that's about it. You know, crafting magic items cost you experience. You know, in older editions, certainly 3.5, there was a real yin and yang for stuff. If you wanted these things, you had to earn it, and if you come up against something which could drain you, you know, I remember playing Tales of the Infinite Staircase, which is a Planescape module, 2nd edition. Not to spoil it for anyone. Spoilers for anybody who's still playing 2nd edition and has yet to play Tales from the Infinite Staircase. I know Planescape's making a resurgence for 5th edition, and there was a trap in it, and if you ran afoul of it, bam, legs off straight away. Harsh.
Yeah.
Too harsh. You know, there's a reason why we've gravitated away from that, but I think we've gone too far to the other extreme in 5th edition. I'd like to see pull it back a little bit. So yeah, of course it needs play testing, and I'll play test it with my group and see where we go at campaign 2, and then maybe campaign 3 or halfway through campaign 2, I'll find a more balanced way of doing it. But yeah, some natural healing, healing kits for regaining hit dice, and the sanctuary system, and we'll see where we go with that.
I have a crit table. When people do a crit, we don't just do this, you know, the double your dice. We roll a D100, and there's a D100 table for ranged attacks. Is that correct? That's not correct. There's a D100 table for melee ranged and spells. And there's also the equivalent for crit fails. So if they get a crit and they get in the 90s on the D100, you go to this other table, which is about basically losing limbs, head, arm, leg. And so it's possible for monsters or players to lose limbs. And I did have a player lose an arm. And how do you feel about that? They don't come back with healing. It's like, no, you've got to either, I don't know. Well, we got a metal arm in a city eventually. That was cool.
Yeah.
He was like, you know what? I'm glad I got rid of that arm. This is awesome story.
It generated a plot, didn't it?
Yeah.
It diverted it. Now we're going to go fix Bob the Barbarian and go get him a new arm. He can't use his two-handed sword, or he can't use his shield.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. I think I'd enjoy that. I think as a player, you know, as session zeros are important. I think for exactly this reason, you know. But I'm finding less and less people willing to sort of have that level of realism in D&D, where you know, they're pretty precious about their characters. Some players. I remember back in the day, having my main character having a backup character and still writing up new character sheets for a backup of a backup. And, and sometimes almost hoping that my main character was going to get bumped off so I could bring in my second.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a balance to be made.
So in other sources, there's Call of Cthulhu and RuneScape. Are you familiar with either of those?
Call of Cthulhu. I've never played RuneScape.
Well, both have the idea that you do not want to get into any fights because they are lethal. RuneScape in particular, and then almost Call of Cthulhu. Yeah, it's like certainly don't get in a gunfight in Call of Cthulhu. You know, you've only got a few hit points, and it's realistic. Yeah, I just wondered if that's more where we should be taking it, like much more hard.
Have you played Warhammer Fantasy?
No, I play Warhammer. I don't play.
The RPG is brilliant. It has a great combat mechanic, and definitely is a bit more realistic. But I think that's perhaps too far the other way. But yeah, it's I want to see. I definitely want to see combat encounters being more deadly. And you can only bump monsters up so much. You can give them a couple of extra hit dice, or you can give them maximum hit points. Dragons, you can make spellcasters as well as, or you could equip magic items to very powerful monsters and so on and so forth. And you can always go and I homebrew a lot of monsters. I get them back from the older editions and bring them into 5th edition. But I think that the easiest way and the most realistic way is by challenging the players to manage their resources, and hit dice is chief amongst it. So yeah, for me, the resting is the bugbear. Fix that, and I think it will bring a whole new level to the game. So yeah, I've yet to really to speak to DMs who run a game with it. Obviously, lots of stuff online about it, lots of people in Reddit and Facebook groups, so on and so forth. But I'd be interested to hear from other DMs to see how they've run it, if they're using systems like that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to campaign 2. To introducing it and seeing where we go with it. Who knows? They'll probably do a life domain cleric now just to keep them up.
Yeah. So if you look at our real lives, let's say your working lives, let's say you get an hour lunch break, that's your short rest. Okay? You might get a morning or an afternoon 15-minute break. So let's say that you get your 8-hour rest of an evening, long rest. You get one short rest. That's the maximum short rests, and then you might get, what would it be? Maybe if it's half. Is there a limit on what hit dice you can roll in the short rest? Is not, is there?
No. Only regaining them on a long rest. You only get half of them back on a long rest. That's the only restriction, really.
So you could have like basically a quarter rest where you can only use half of your hit dice available. And then I think you would have to redress the balance with those players who are like, well, I got to long rest because I need my spell things back. I would probably loosen it and say you can gain your spells back on a short rest.
Maybe. I think regaining your spell slots is fine as is. It's really the hit dice I have the issue with. Because I know they say that hit points isn't an actual representation of character health. Every time you take 2 or 3 damage, it's not a cut or a graze. It's as much a measurement of your luck as anything. But I like to be fairly descriptive in combat encounters, and if I've just dealt with a fighter 30 points of damage from a dragon biting them, then there has to be a physical representation of that. And it's hard to explain that away if they take a rest and they're all feeling better the next day.
Do you make your monsters noticeably get weaker or sluggish, or is there any towards 0 hit points? Does it show?
Yeah, I mean, I exclusively DM online now. I used to only play in person, and then obviously the lockdown came, and I didn't play D&D for a while. Got the itch, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna have to teach myself how to do it online. So I got the account and started making the maps. I soon started making maps online. I used to make my own scenery. My wife used to hate it. The house was covered in scenery, which my little projects. But I switched over to making them online. And part of that now is API scripts, and I use Roll20. sorry if I'm not allowed to or allowed to name drop. I know there are lots of other virtual tabletop sites available, but I use that one, and there's a very good API script which gives a green tin aura to a character and monster, and then as you subtract it points off them, the aura sort of goes from green to yellow,
right.
orange, and then right down to red. So the characters don't have to ask, how's it looking? They have it right there, and they don't know. And it's brilliant when they go, I've just dealt with 32 points of damage and it's still green, and they all go, rubbish.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, it's a very, very useful little script.
Yes, that is good. I do try and say it's stomping around, and and like you can hit monsters, or you can be hit on your armor and it bruises. It's not like, you pierced, somebody's pierced through, because that's not how armor works. It's hard to describe how you get hit with armor on and you're not skewered through the heart. But
no,
much like when you hit a monster and it does 10 damage, but it's got 300 health, it's like, well, yeah, you hit it. It just doesn't really do much. And then, yeah.
I used to play in a game, how many years ago now? Must be 16, 17 years ago. And the DM had suit of chainmail, and he had, it was called an arming sword, but I suppose you call it a long sword in today's. And he had a dagger, and they're up there on the wall, and you could go up and you could feel the weight of them. You could put on the chainmail, you could hit somebody. Chainmail is great at slashing, resisting slashing, but not very good at piercing. And that really gives you an idea of how effective armor can be. And you're right, people, I think people in the medieval period, Middle Ages period, when they were in battles and were getting hit by these weapons, it wasn't the fact that they were getting stabbed and they were getting pierced, it was the bruising and the damage done to internal organs. So I try and I try and have a bit of realism when it comes to that. And be a bit descriptive, because the players want it. They want to know, I've just done X amount of damage, I've maxed out my damage on that attack. What do I get?
So when the players are beaten and bruised and they heal, do they still look beaten and bruised, or do all their cuts magically vanish?
Do you know, I mentioned earlier about the encounter I had when they were flying, long distance flying, and they got attacked. They got attacked by a trio of young red dragons, and one of them got a crit on the party's ranger and dropped the ranger. And I agreed with the player afterwards. I said, look, it was an amazing. It's the first time I've actually downed that player. That player character, I should say, in the entirety of the campaign, because she's primarily an archer and she stays out of danger. And I said, how amazing would it be if you have some telltale legacy from that, like a lingering injury? And I'm not talking anything in game mechanics, but something you would role play. And she goes, do you know what? I really like that. So now she has a limp. She aches in cold weather. From the time that dragon snapped her spine.
Really good.
Yeah, and it's that's a cool thing to have. A scar, or
scar, yeah,
a streak of white hair, perhaps. When you're counting some undead, something for players to lean into. A proper battle scar.
Yeah, I do like that. Yeah, I can't remember what I was going to say, but like when players have a fight and then walk into a town, it's like, surely you're covered in blood.
Yeah. I think adventurers, the game kind of lends an idea that they're all going around in pristine condition, but I think adventurers are probably a dirty ragtag bunch.
Smelly.
Yeah, smelly. They've been eating dried, field rations, or just existing on good berries.
Yeah.
For weeks on end. Most commoners, I think, would close the door and shutter their windows when they see him come through.
Absolutely. And that's another thing, getting to villages, a lot of, like, is it clerics again who say that you can just have rests in monasteries and stuff for free because that's what your thing gives.
Yeah, that lends over to this sort of renown, isn't it? Now, reputation.
Yeah.
If you're gonna go around being murder hobos, is the tavern keeper gonna want to have you there? If you cause trouble in Loganberry, 10 miles down the road, and word spread up here that there's some adventurers and they're brawling around, are they going to want to have you there? Are they going to charge you double? Is that something a lot of DMs do, or do we just keep on pushing through the major plot points?
Yeah, Well, James, I think we've pretty much covered resting, and we'll see if anyone viewers-wise wants to give us a nudge on other ideas. I look forward to reading those. So thank you very much, James, for your time. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, lovely. Nice being here. Thank you very much, and love what you're doing with the channel and with the Facebook.
Thank you.
So yeah,
that's wonderful. Thank you.